Yeah, this is almost a data story. I think it's better if we view it as a data, because if you look at the outcomes, there is inequality. So part of this will be some side argument about whether the word racism should be used. Back to the data, because it is simply true. They've done some research. University of Manchester has looked into it. They're calling for radical action being needed to tackle overwhelming minority ethnic health inequalities in the NHS. They described in this damning study that they found vast and widespread inequalities. It seems like some of this is, I don't want to use the word understandable because it gives too much leeway, but this is a system that would have developed with a different ethnic mix, breakdown of the UK. So there will be reasons to try and change the way in which you're doing things. But some of the things you read about, if you read the story, other things that good treatments are less likely to be given to people who aren't white. Simple as that. That could be fixed straight away just by looking at the outcomes and going, no, there needs to be change. Correct,
exactly. And there are statistics about, for example, women of colour dying in birth, which is a higher statistic than the equivalent of white mums to be. So, you know, there's definitely a case to answer. How do we fix this, do you think?
I think by looking at the outcomes. I think this is why I'm so obsessed with it being a data story, because you could spend all of your time arguing about the reasons for it, and that's all very well. In fact, one of the treatments that's less likely to be given out to people who aren't white is CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, which itself, I think there's an irony in it, because itself is about treating the symptoms rather than trying to be too obsessed with the causes. And that, for me, is a nice metaphor about how this should be done. Was it end of last year, they were talking about how the oxygen meters were more successful at measuring oxygen levels in the blood of white people because it's all to do with absorption of light. So that story breaks as being a racist story. Just get some scientists in, some techno person who can make a sensor that's sensitive for different skin colours, solve it rather than obsess about the cause.
And what is this CBT? I thought that was one of those fancy drugs that you comedians take.
Possibly both. Possibly.
You're currently on CBT,
I'm
right?
on something. And it might be
but
CBT.
Cognitive behavioural therapy, what is that when it's in home?
It's a way of looking at how an emotional impact is about to affect you, and then you change that. You change the symptom of what the problem is in the mind, rather than doing the psychodynamic stuff, which is like going back to your childhood and blaming everything on mother.
Well, I much prefer that.
Yeah.
Scott, what do you think about this? It must be the same in the States, health inequality.
Well, I think that inequality in health is more about coverage in the U.S. And poverty, and poor neighborhoods not having any coverage at all. You know, it's so interesting to live here now and to see the safety net that's provided by the NHS, and how I feel like it is Britain's proudest hour. And I'm so impressed, my husband and I both are, he's from Brazil, by how people are looked after here. And I know that there's problems, obviously, in the ones you've mentioned, and financing and funding and all that. But it does seem that the NHS is interested in fixing itself, which I'm always impressed by, too. I think it can be done. And I think it's important to represent all communities and stuff in healthcare, obviously. But, you know, I come from a background where the LGBT community is completely ignored during the AIDS pandemic in the U.S.
Yeah.
And all I think is about fight.
Actually, if anything, demonized under the Reagan administration.
So, yeah. And they had to educate themselves about what their own problems were and then go to the doctors themselves. It is kind of interesting to try to educate yourself. What's wrong with you? I always type in my symptoms and wait for the word cancer to roll up the screen. I'm sure that's what it is.
Yeah.
But it's much better, I think, to see.
Well, look, if you want to show me your lump, I'll take a look after the show.